Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this panel session on the role of tripartism promoting sustainable and inclusive growth. Right, my name is James, and I'm your MC for today. Today we are very privileged to have with us representatives from the government, worker and employer organizations, and a member of the Global Commission on the Future of Work join us in this panel session. Now, without further ado, let me just introduce them. We have, of course, His Excellency Mr. M. Kulasegran, Minister of Human Resources, Malaysia. Mr. Richard Wagstaff, President of the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions. Ms. Goh Swee Chen, Chairperson of the Institute of Human Resource Professionals. Mr. Encheta Tan, President Emeritus of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines and member of the Employers Group of the International Labour Organization's governing body. We have Mr. Philip Jennings, member of the ILO Global Commission on the Future of Work. And our moderator for this panel is Dr. Gillian Koh, Deputy Director, Research of the Institute of Policy Studies at the National University of Singapore. Now over to you, Gillian.
Thank you, James. Good morning, one and all, and welcome to this panel discussion on the role of tripartism. And the subtitle is Promoting Sustainable and Inclusive Growth. We're all here first to recognize and celebrate the ILO's 100th anniversary. So join me in congratulating the ILO for making this milestone. To mark its milestone, it got together a commission in order to look at the world of the future of work. As you know, there are very many key driving forces that will shape the future of work, that will affect our brothers, our sisters, our friends, our fellow citizens, our fellow business leaders, our union leaders, and also many of those whom we put the responsibility on in managing the transition, human resource professionals. So what we've done this morning is to really be quite comprehensive and assemble a panel to represent all those sectors in discussing how we can ensure that as the world goes through the transitions of technological change, climate change, and demographic transitions, we can make sure that all of us plan in a way so that workers will have a better life through those transitions, that we take advantage of the opportunities that those transitions bring us, and try to minimize the downsides of those transitions, and that we will all live a better future. So with that, I hope you will allow me to pass the mic or the time over to Mr. Jennings, who was one of the members of that commission who compiled the report, and invite him to speak on some of the key learning points, key recommendations of the report, and end with some of the sharp recommendations specifically on the need for all of us to cooperate. Government, business leaders, and labor, in discussing how we can ensure that no one is left behind as we go through those transitions. But in fact, how can we plan that everyone can do even better through those transitions to make good on all the opportunities that those transitions bring us? Okay, so Mr. Jennings, you have about 5 minutes. Please share with us some of the key learning points and recommendations. Ready, get set, go.
Yes, I'm sorry that the mere mention of my name has brought a lot of hilarity into the room. There are some veterans from the Singaporean trade union movement who are familiar with my speaking style and also my complete indiscipline with respect to the time given. However, given the presence of I think this is why the seating has been so organized, so that Gillian can give me one hell of a nudge when I'm going beyond. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here. I congratulate Singapore and ASEAN on undertaking this initiative. It is important that this conversation takes place in every workplace and in every nation and in every sector, in every country in ASEAN. The conversation must not stop with this report. It must not stop with the conversation today. You must go back home and demand these tripartite conversations about the transformation in front of us. I'd also like to point out that it's an opportunity for me to mark my own homework. And as you can imagine, I'm very pleased with the results, but this is my own self-assessment. Now then, here we go. In terms of the report, ILO Centenary 1919. The report says that this is the greatest social contract in history without precedent. Our challenge is to ensure that the next century we have a reinvigorated social contract. That is a key conclusion of what we were talking about. We had a very short time period to get this report together. First meeting in October, the autumn, European autumn of 2017, and we had a year to get the job done. Other global commissions have taken a lot longer. We were very efficient, and I think you will find in the conclusions that we were on the money. We have workable conclusions. We started the conversation with a reality check. A decent work deficit in this world. A union rights deficit in this world. A collective bargaining deficit in this world. A social protection deficit in this world. And a growing gap between those with the means and those without. Essentially, a world in trouble. And that is why the theme of the report, the title of the report, is For a Brighter Future. That is to say that we are convinced that with the policy framework that we have in place, that brighter future can be obtained and those deficits will be overcome. The report is raw. It says labor is not a commodity. And we feel in the world of work that we are becoming commodified, that we're another article of commerce. We are not. There's a warning in the report that if we don't change, things will get worse. The report is not complacent. It says that unless we change, we are sleepwalking into further issues and tensions. It's also bold because it calls for a change in direction. And that is why we have the theme of human-centered and a reinvigorated social contract. Human-centered in two senses. We believe that a new growth model for the world should be based around the quality of life of the people of this world. We've been commodified. We've been flexibilized. We find our voices eliminated at the place of work. And we find the need has now come to put the human at the center, to invest in people. If you invest in people and their conditions of life, you have a new economic generator. And we feel this dimension has been lost. Now, we have a number of pillars in the conclusions, which I will refer to, which are specific to the world of tripartism, and how we feel that this can help. We talk about investing in people's capabilities. In Singapore, you'll be very aware of this. This commission calls that for every sector of the economies here and everywhere must have some consideration of the transformation in those sectors. We have not bought the message of a jobless future. There will be jobs in the future, but the transformation is enormous. And we are not prepared for it. The report is very clear. We are not prepared as a world. So therefore, we talk about transformation, and we need to dig deep into what that transformation means. You have this experience in Singapore already, which I know is work in progress. It says that collective bargaining is key. And for collective bargaining is key, it means that every state in ASEAN has to ratify the ILO core labor standards. Freedom of association and collective bargaining. We want to see the opportunity taken with this report for the ratification of those labor standards. This report says that if you invest in labor market institutions, that you find a path to human-centered growth and development. They say, this report says that by investing in these institutions, consider it as a public good. For the last 2 generations, we've had situations in many, many parts of the world where collective bargaining was somehow seen as an obstacle. We see it as an asset in terms of dealing with the transformation in front of us. And if labor is not to become a commodity, we say that the institutions of work are the building blocks of just societies and include laws, regulations, employment, contracts, unions and employers, and collective agreements and labor administration and inspection systems. We talk about a universal labor guarantee to give a floor of rights to people to deal with informalization and the creeping informality in work. We talk about public investment in those labor market institutions to build tripartite structures and to build a social dialogue. The report talks about respect for core labor standards. It talks about a worker voice, whether it's in works councils, on the board of directors, the extension of collective bargaining. And we've also talked about the fact that our wage-fixing institutions have been neglected. If we look at the share of wages in the ASEAN region, we see that in some cases it's in decline or standing still, and in other parts of the world it's in plain reverse. And if you want to reverse this balance, then workers need a voice, collective bargaining has to become in place, and it should be seen as an asset and as an imperative of economic development, and that means wage fixing should be revitalized. So this is a very powerful message for tripartism. It says if we're to have a reinvigorated social contract, then we need more tripartism, we need more social dialogue. I was disappointed to read the kind of half-term report on the Bali Declaration, the ILO conference, which took place 2 years ago, and they're still observing that the conditions for social dialogue need to improve in this region and elsewhere in the world. So therefore, in conclusion, after I'm 2 minutes over already, which is not bad by my standards, I just want to say that this is an optimistic report. This gives a policy framework. For all of you that fear the future, there are answers. And some of those answers may not look as out of the box as some of the people may be looking for. But investing in people, investing in the institutions of work, investing in sustainable and decent work, governments taking responsibility, then we begin to put together a construct which will, I think, ensure a brighter future for the working people of this planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Thank you for kicking us off. So the key points that you have spelled out, apart from the 3 pillars which is mentioned in the report, is really to knuckle down and discuss how better we can facilitate the social dialogue among government that has not just the responsibility, but I believe the keen interest in ensuring that labor makes the transition through these changes to come out better. But also employers, part of that social dialogue, because you not just have the power, but you know what the changes are, but you also have the ability to convene diverse interests to be part of that social dialogue. And also, you mentioned the workers. Representation, you talked about collective bargaining. So workers as well, how can you be part of that social dialogue? So let's begin our dialogue this morning. Participants, I'm going to invite the Minister of Human Resources of Malaysia to share with us his thoughts and further down the panel. I thought I'd kick off with the first question. What are some of the key concerns in your countries and in your organizations to do with work that makes this conversation about tripartism and social protection so important? So share with us the conditions in your country and organizations. So
Thank you.
first, Minister Kula, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Obviously, it's very interesting what Philip has said, the future of work and the work that ILO has done. Much to learn from that. But let me go back to my country. Let me just say first, we have these tripartite meetings, which under our constitution is only required 2 times a year. But we are already in the 4th meeting. I have a monthly meeting with my tripartite members that includes the unions and the employers. We have great challenges in a sense that we have full employment. Many people will be very happy we have full employment, but then we have the other problem is underemployment, which is a very hidden form of people unemployed, and many are not in the know. But we are a bit better than many people, many countries, in the sense we have the employment insurance system, which takes care of people who are unemployed or people who have been displaced or retrenched. They get certain payments, and on top of it, retraining and training and upskilling is done. So that kind of thing has been addressed. It just started about 3 years ago, and it came into being last year, and is in full operation from now. So in a sense, to me, it is a very successful thing. And one of the things that I went for the job fair, I found, and they even do a CV for anybody who comes and get them ready in a professional manner, because there are a lot of workers who are not even abreast to this kind of things. So we do the CV, and even we give it to the employee so that he or she can use it as a form of assistance to get a job. But far more important is the fact that we have, for me, I think the greatest challenge is getting the most number of women to work, especially those who are working and have gone on leave for family matters, the youth, and those who are physically challenged. And on top of it is those who are above 60, which is also a grave concern to us. I'm very concerned about those above 60, because I myself got a job when I became 60 as a minister. But if I can get a job at 60, I can see no reason why others cannot. And with the ample experience they have, it's a great loss. And we have in fact conducted a study on those who are above 60. We have even conducted, Doctor, a study on why you are forcing Malaysians to work in Singapore.
It's by force? I thought we have
voluntary force.
I thought we attract them.
Yeah, I know. You know what I mean. So these are the great challenges we have. In fact, before I became minister, one of the things that we felt that to address how to attract back these sizable people who are working in Singapore. And in the studies, it shows that it's basically dollars and cents. So one way you can assist us is to devalue your currency.
Unlikely. Not likely.
That will simply solve the problem overnight. But I think far more important is to enhance the quality and then the productivity, and then to have great investors so that the income of these people will go up, and then hopefully we can get back these workers to my country. The studies correctly shows that.
In fact, Minister, one of the key pillars of the report is indeed an appeal to the business sector to create the right incentives and invest in new industries, new ways of doing things to provide job opportunities, decent work on a sustainable basis.
Obviously,
so,
I think
well
that goes without saying. But let me just end up by saying something
Okay.
what Philip said. He ended up by saying in the coming Geneva meeting, he's asking all member countries to adopt this Convention on Freedom of Association. Right? Yes. Now, I am for it. The employers are against it. The employees are agreeable, but defer it by 5 years. So what do I do? So I'm caught.
Okay.
Now, I can't take a legislation to Parliament and say, you pass it now, but you wait. After 5 years only it will become law. The employers are against it. So I am really caught in that. I thought we'll come with great news to Geneva and say we are going to, I hope so, I can prevail on that.
Thank you so much, Minister. Thank you for your opening remarks. Now, we will do a set of opening remarks before we take questions and comments from the floor. So the next panelist to kind of share his point of view on his concerns in his organization as well as in his country on the future of work. And I suppose, like Minister did, lead into the challenges of tripartism. Mr. Wallstaff, over to you.
Thank you, and kia ora, good morning everyone. We have an 87 problem as well, I might just say at the beginning of this. Look, New Zealand, clearly we have our unique perspective on this, but I think we probably share some of the issues that many kind of market and liberal economies have. In terms of the future of work, there's a whole spectrum of views in our country about whether it's utopian or dystopian or somewhere in between. But I think generally people are quite anxious about the future of work. Working people, they see in the media the scare stories, the machines taking over their jobs, the climate ruining their jobs, and the other issues of globalisation and demographics. And one of the things that strikes me when I look at the Future of Work report that Phil and his team put together is the optimism and the sense of opportunity and the sense of urgency. And I don't think, as a whole, we really share that in New Zealand. And I think we tend to be a bit determinist about it, techno-determinist, as the Director General would put it. And so it's a huge opportunity, and some of us are trying to take advantage of that, but it's a huge ask for our country and the history that we have. In terms of tripartism, New Zealand's history is quite patchy. In the last 100 years or so, we had a very strong welfare state. We had a very strong tripartite arrangements in labour and in arranging the economy. But in the 80s and 90s, we sort of did a 180-degree turn on that. And I think, and things like tripartism and joined-up work really went out of fashion in a big way. And I think we're going to have to relearn a lot of what we've forgotten, because those very skills that we once were very proud of really have now been gone for 40 years. Now, I don't want to be completely pessimistic about it. Of course, there has been some good work done, and we have had some remnants of tripartism. We've got a lot going in the health industry. We've done some great work around pay equity, and that's been through tripartite processes, and we've now got a joint project to roll out a tripartite approach. And indeed, our current government is very committed to tripartism, and we have a tripartite future of work forum itself on which business unions, and it's chaired by the Minister of Finance. And so we certainly have a policy commitment to it. But I think for me a real concern is turning that into practice and into action. When I say practice, I do think it's not, you just don't get people in a room and they automatically do this stuff well, whether it be in the workplace or in the industry or at a higher level. I think there are real skills and things we need to learn about genuinely engaging, genuinely problem solving, genuinely agreeing and taking responsibility for the outcome. I think because of the sort of the adversarial approaches that we've taken in the last 40 years, those skills don't come easy to us, and we tend to get in a room and cross our arms and say that'll never work, but don't actually say it. And I think we need to learn those skills to change that. And there's a willingness to do that, but we need to be taught it as well. And I think here there's a huge role for the government to play, that convening, that pulling us together and leading us down this track. And I'm very confident that business and labour in New Zealand can do that, but we won't be able to do it without very strong support from the centre. So when I think about my concerns about where we are, at a sort of a higher level, my concern is that we won't embrace the opportunity. We'll see it'll be on a long list of things to do, of which it is a long list, and it won't really get the urgency, the scale of commitment to take the full opportunity of the future that we face. I'm envious when I come to Singapore. I keep telling our people, look at Singapore, look at the urgency, the investment, the scale of what they're doing. I think that's a huge challenge to a country that's learned to be hands-off. and learn to run its economy as a hands-off. I think we're moving, but we've got to move fast. I'm also concerned that we won't learn how to engage properly, and as a result of that, we'll leave people behind. And that is a huge risk. I think we're seeing that in many countries today, particularly in the US and in Europe, where people who don't see themselves in the future will try and prevent it and resist it and politically resist it, and there'll be political forces that will take advantage of that.
Okay.
And so finally, all of that put together, I get a sense of, too little, too late is my greatest fear, but we're not giving up. We can do this, and with these kinds of meetings, I think it'll help us along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wellstaff, and thank you for giving us that sense of urgency and a sense of the relevance of our conversation this morning. We don't want to end up in a state of too little, too late, right? So that's why we're talking about how we can improve our processes of tripartism. So Mr. Wellstaff said he's very envious of the situation in Singapore. So it's over to Ms. Goh to share with us the situation in Singapore. Let's start off with concerns about the future of work here, and then end off with a little flavor of that tripartite relationship we have here that Mr. Wellstaff was envious of. Over to you.
Okay, yeah, we're already getting some ideas from the fellow panelists. One is don't force Malaysians to work in Singapore, devalue the currency, and yeah, but I think what's the value in this conversation is the tripartism that occurs within the country that's important, but it's also demonstrating the value of countries talking to each other, learning from each other. And I think that's one value as we talk about tripartism that we should not lose. Let me just give a context on Singapore first. In terms of labor participation rate, it is healthy, it's 67.7%, and the combined unemployment is 2.1%. And this is all a demonstration of the good work, Richard, that you have mentioned that has been done through the tripartite alliance. The demographics and technological advances that we've been hearing throughout over the past few years, that will significantly alter the nature of work. And I just want to state three things, and these are at a macro level, at a country level, and also when you look at it from a corporation level, it is concerns at a corporation level and at the unions as well. And I'm not sharing anything new. It's a reinforcement of the dialogue that has been ongoing. And first, I just want to refer to a book that was published in the early 2000s by Thomas Friedman, and that book is titled "The World is Flat." And essentially what that described is we can no longer, with advancement in technology, we can no longer think of work activities as being confined in geography. In fact, work can be broken down, it can be unbundled, and because of technology, it can be done in any part of the world. And what this means is the unbundling of the work activities, we can see probably two effects, and this is one. One is the increase in contingent work, the increase in the informal work economy, where you no longer have this concept of full-time employment with a particular employer. And the other one is this traditional model of employment where you can see work from end to end being conducted within a company. You see work being outsourced, work being moved from one geography to another. The second point is demographic shift, and many of us talked about it. It's mentioned in the report, was mentioned this morning in the opening speeches as well. In Singapore, the median age is 40.8 years, the median age of the population. OH support ratio, so this is the number of people supporting within the age group of 20 to 64, supporting those 65 and above. Today it stands at 4.8. And in some of the countries, such as Germany, Italy, Japan, it is at about 3. And we see this number declining. And when it declines, corporations, governments, the unions need to start to see what are the kind of income and benefits that will cater for a situation like this, where fewer and fewer employable population are supporting a group that are no longer working. And there's another thing about this demographic shift, which is when you look at the post-war generation who had probably in their 60s, 70s or older now, who had patchy education, and when you look at the shift of work, where the more transactional type work are getting done elsewhere, and you need higher skilled work, can this group of workers be adapted to be able to handle work that are perhaps more complex, more higher at a higher skill requirements? And then finally, looking ahead, if left unattended, these concerns on growing social divide along the fault lines of age, income, education, it could pose strife. And again, we've heard from this morning, from conversations elsewhere, that we cannot prosper, we cannot live well in a situation where there's poverty and where there is strife. And a lot of discussion around growth cannot be at the expense of the environment as well. Now I want to come to the role of tripartism, and in Singapore, tripartism is a strong fundamental in the way policies are being developed, and it is a spirit that has been deeply institutionalized from way back in the 60s, and it come about in a form of requiring a form of a body that can peacefully negotiate and define policies in work, in labor, in business growth, in a peaceful manner. And some examples of these are in the way, last year in the complete representation of PMETs. And I want to end with a remark here on the fact that because we're a city-state, we need to learn how to live within a confined space and prosper. And therefore, social cohesion and also a very diverse and mobile workforce must be an inherent strength for us. And therefore, developing people to their fullest potential will continue to be a goal and also a challenge at the same time.
Thank you, Ms. Goh. And we can't do it on your own, right? Not as HR or not as business leaders, right? Okay, thank you for that. Now, pass it on to Mr. Tan, who is President Emeritus of the Employers' Confederation of the Philippines. So let's get a flavor of not just what are the concerns that are faced by workers in the Philippines, but at businesses in the Philippines, and give us a flavor of the practice of tripartism in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goh. First of all, let me just start by saying that the masterful presentation by Mr. Jennings of the Global Commission will ensure that we'll have a dynamic exchange today. So, colleagues, I suggest you fasten your seat belts. Let me say that the topic is a very important topic. You asked the question as to how tripartism can achieve some of the recommendations of the Global Commission's report. Let me put in context my answer. First of all, the Global Commission report is a very ambitious and formidable document, let me say. And as I mentioned in our meeting with the employer this morning, the brain power that went into that report is really impressive. However, if you look at all the recommendations, you name it, it's there. You will not be surprised if an employer would say that that is a blueprint for a worker's paradise. But so what? If you can achieve that, why not? That would be, to borrow the lyrics of a song, it will be a wonderful world. So you have it there. Social protection from birth to old age, universal labor guarantee, living wage, and so many other things. You put them all together. It's really a very heavy responsibility, especially for employers, and for governments. Now, how are we going to at least moderate this so that it will not, spin off into some kind of a socialist manifesto in disguise? We have tripartism, where the workers and the employers and government will be able to exchange ideas in order to decide what are doable, what are not. And so, first of all, I think there should be a very, very strong commitment to strengthen the tripartite mechanism in all countries. And if you talk about the region, the ASEAN region, I think it is a high time that the employers' organizations and the trade unions organizations in the region should be made part of the decision-making process, not only in the political front. So I am even prepared to say that the ASEAN Confederation of Employers and the ASEAN Trade Unions Council should be in the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, because there is no sector there that is providing information on labor and social policy. It's strictly economic and political in that area. In any case, I think it's high time that we put flesh and blood to the idea of tripartism in all countries and in all regions. In the Philippines, it's well and alive. Tripartism is very, very strong in the country because it has been institutionalized. Because tripartism cannot be ad hoc. On company level, you don't have government's presence there. So what we did in the Philippines since from the 1970s to date, it has been institutionalized. And as I said, it's well and alive because we have a labor code that institutionalized tripartism. For example, in the matter of policies of government, we have established the Tripartite Peace and Industrial Council, where there are members of the workers' groups and employers and government that will discuss policies of the Department of Labor and Employment. And when you have that, then it is something that the social partners can live with. The acceptance is immediate. And that's tripartism in the Philippines. On wages, the same thing. We have on all regions, regional wage and productivity boards. The workers are represented there, the employers are represented there, the Department of Trade and NEDA are represented in that body, and they decide increases in the minimum wage based on the conditions in the region. And there are other tripartite bodies in the Philippines. National Labor Relations Council is a labor dispute settlement machinery. It's also tripartite. We have many institutions that are tripartite in character. And so I think, again, while the blueprint of the Global Commission report is laudable, commendable, I think tripartism will be the mechanism that will at least moderate whatever may be the excesses of the recommendations, and so we can have something which is reasonable and which the social partners can live with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. So in the first round of discussion, I think we had identification of some segments of labor that will be particularly vulnerable. Ms. Goh went through them, including the category of contingent workers. We have Minister share about how, on the flip side, those we want to include further into the workforce are the women, the youth, the physically challenged, as well as to keep in the workforce senior workers. So bear these segments of labor in mind. They will be affected by the transformations and transitions in the world of work, but we can picture them, right? And we've got to question how we can do better for them. Then we had a good sense from Mr. Tan about how the process of tripartism has been institutionalized in the Philippines. That's the same in Singapore. And Mr. Wallstaff said that that's been a strong practice in the past, but they lost a bit of that fervor and have to reignite, revitalize the practice of tripartism in New Zealand. So again, think about your own countries and your organizations. Where are you in the journey of practice of tripartism? Strong, institutionalized, or weak, or lack of skills for the joint problem solving we're talking about? And then, quite interestingly, Minister also ended his little discussion with how in the day-to-day issues of trying to improve the conditions of labor, he's met with some difficulties, requires some problem solving in relation to the business sector. So I think that really put in sharp focus the true need for an improved practice in tripartism. Okay, I'm going to do one quick final round of questions and then it'll be over to you. We'd love to hear your comments. We're happy to take your questions. But the key thing is this, that this is a discussion on the region and our practice of tripartism, how we can do better for labor. But it will be taken forward to a discussion at the global level in ILO in June, I believe, Mr. Jennings, about what other recommendations can be made in the practical way to strengthen tripartism and to deliver better conditions for our workers in the region and the world. Okay, so get ready, folks. Quick round of questions. So what are some of the key things that you want to see improved, maybe in your country, maybe at the regional level or global level, to help us improve the role of tripartism in order to deliver better social protection, better collective agreements in the world of work in your countries? Okay, all right, so just some quick points. Minister, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, I think the tripartism is really important. You can't get things done without proper consultations. I'm for one, not only with my tripartite partners, but also to all other stakeholders. I think there must be a place where we can have discussion, and we must always remember we can agree to disagree. I think that's also very important. And having said that, I think we should not forget the basic requirement of any worker in this world: skilling, upskilling, and reskilling. I think that must be given the priority so that they can earn better and they can have a good living wage in their life. Right.
Thank you. One of the issues that we have, and I think many countries have, is the elephant in the room, really, union density. And we haven't signed up to 87. We don't have law that promotes the extension of bargaining. We're working on those things, but tripartism and having all the voices at the table means that Labor has to be able to truly represent more of the workforce and have more of the workforce in unions to be able to do that. There isn't any alternative. If workers are going to be represented, they have to be representative through independent organisations, which are unions, and we have to find a way to support the growth of union membership more evenly. Thank you.
I think the constant dialogue and collaboration between the three parties are extremely important because that dialogue gives us the early warning systems. It tells us where are the difficulties ahead of time, and it gives the opportunity for partners to dialogue and to respond and to work together on a potential solution. The oftentimes at a superficial level, the objectives of each of the group could be viewed as different, because you'll say the businesses are looking for competitiveness, the union are looking for the rights of the individual, and the government just wants peace for all. But oftentimes those constant collaboration and dialogue will get us to that common place. And I agree with Minister in that, sometimes a compromise is required.
Yeah, some thoughts about improving tripartition would be, in the context of my country, for example, is that we should expand the areas by which the tripartite partners would be able to give their inputs. It does not have to be limited only to, let's say, wages or social security, occupational health. In fact, even the matter of sustainability of enterprises. We should not leave that only to financial institutions and government. I think the tripartite partners should be able to put their inputs into that. And that is one thing that we have also observed as employers in the Global Commission report, that we have not seen much details on what are the measures that would help enterprises become productive and sustainable. Because you have to have that first as a precondition before you can deliver the goods in a manner of speaking that's recommended by the Global Commission report. You have to make the enterprises sustainable and productive. So I think these areas can also be the subject of tripartite consultations. We should know what is it that the organized labor can do for us, you know, not just the other way around. It should not just be shared risks. There should also be shared responsibility.
But also shared rewards.
Yes?
Right. Okay. So this is the time when Ms. Jennings, you jump in. What are some of the key things you had in mind when you walked in this morning to want to say in order to improve the practice of tripartism, in order to improve the lot of workers and businesses and ultimately governments too? Why ultimately, I don't know, but anyway, over to you.
I'm encouraged by the warmth of the reception for the report in many different areas. Last week, the OECD produced their employment outlook. This is a once-in-a-generational report, and it was on the future of work. And what they say does not take away from what the ILO Commission report said. It says that we have growing prosperity in this world, and their concerns about the distribution. I know you mentioned pie in the sky, but from our perspective, the pie is getting bigger and the workers' share of it is getting smaller. Now, these are pretty crude and fundamental terms, but all the union people out there know exactly what I'm talking about. And this makes their lives extremely difficult because they are reflecting the concerns of their own membership who feel this. When we look at our own global polling about what's on workers' minds, almost 2/3 say we live paycheck to paycheck. The Gallup poll that was done amongst the Asian nations said that the 3/4 of the workers' response was, we don't think enough is being done to help us face this insecure future, this new future. We are proud of our nation, we are proud of our families and our communities, but we need a helping hand through this process. We need to be accompanied. So what we tried to do in the Commission and what the OECD said is to try, there are things that can be done which are workable and pragmatic and affordable, and that concerned the labor market regulation to ensure that contingent workers don't fall through, because when that contingent workforce falls through, they are penalized. They don't get the coverage of tripartism, they don't get the coverage of collective agreements, and the income support for them is 50% worse than for other workers in standard forms of employment because they don't cover. The OECD says extend collective bargaining. I mean, this is a shift in thinking this is the world's biggest think tank, representing 85% of the world economy almost, and therefore they're saying extend collective bargaining, invest in skills in education, and invest in social protection. When I looked at our report, and I looked at the UN Economic Commission report for Asia and Pacific, I felt that we were echoing in terms of being people-centered and socially responsible, and also echoing the economic and social report of this year, which talks about a region of ambitions beyond growth. No one can deny the economic success of this region. No one can deny the entrepreneurial spirit that you have seen. No one can deny the endeavor that business people have shown. No one can deny the investment that has been attracted and continues to be attracted in a difficult world. And we've had 50 years of growth, which has lifted millions out of poverty. However, the balance sheet is still not positive enough for the people of the region. So when the UN Economic Commission itself says ambitions beyond growth, and they talk about an investment plan in the social agenda, when they talk about finding $1.5 trillion a year, is their estimate about what this would mean. You can have, by 2030, if this investment is found, if a shift in economic thinking is found, if you become people-centered and human-centered, you can eliminate extreme poverty. You can keep people in work. And you can have a healthy tripartism built around robust labor institutions. We recognize the strength of the market and the business community, but also the conditionalities around that. The sense is that power is shifted too much the other way. And one way of rebuilding this sense of share, this sense of community, this sense of co-responsibility is for these basic core labor standards to be respected and to be implied, so that we can breathe some new oxygen once again to go beyond some of the more adversarial relationships that we see as a result of this. Hunger is adversarial. Not having a living wage is a kind of, it was mentioned this morning, a kind of a violence. And as union leaders, we feel this very, very strongly. Therefore, the Commission's conclusions, the UN Economic Commission conclusions, the Bali Declaration of the ILO, I found was very encouraging and optimistic. And I would say, leading by example, if ASEAN could recognize ATUC and your business community as a formal partner, where you can sit together and have this conversation about the labor policy, about a shifting economic paradigm, I think it makes ASEAN stronger as an institution.
I almost feel like I should make you an honorary citizen of ASEAN. Thank you so much for your optimism and your desire to see a better future. Yeah?
I'm going on too long. Thank you.
Okay, I think Ms. Goh, you wanted to jump in, or is there a reason you've got the mic in your hand? Anyone else? It's okay, very
Just one
quickly, and
item.
then it will be over to you. Mr. Tan, final word before we cut.
Mr. Jennings mentioned ATUC and the ASEAN Confederation of Employers. We just had a bilateral meeting about a month ago on labor migration. It was between ATUC and the ACE. We hope that this could be frequent, so that we will be able to influence government, but make us first equal members in the advisory body that advises the political arm of the ASEAN countries.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Shall we? We'll come back, final round. Okay, over to you. Please take the opportunity, we have 36 minutes, take the opportunity to share your comments, your suggestions, or if you have questions as well, feel free to post them. Give us your name, where you come from, and wait for the mic to come to you if possible. Otherwise, just feel free to stand up. Yes, the gentleman there. Who else? Anyone else? Hands up. Okay, please proceed. Yeah. The mic is coming to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ko. My name is Shoya Yoshida. I'm a General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, Asia Pacific. So no worry, I'll be very brief and punctual, I have a stronger sense of the punctuality than what Brother Jennings has, yeah. And on behalf of all the workers participants, we welcome and also appreciate the adoption of the ASEAN Labor Minister's statement. And the key message, coming from the Global Commission's report, is a key to the brighter future work, is a social dialogue, right parties. As mentioned by the Brother Jennings, in December 2016 in Bali, Indonesia, all the ILO tripartite constituents gathered in the ILO regional meeting, and we all agree that labor governance, social dialogue need to be improved, and we all, committed to realizing the fundamental right and the principle at work. To this end, to promoting the ratification of the Convention 87 on the freedom of association and the right to organize, and Convention 98, right to organize and also the right to collective bargaining. But what is the reality? among the 10 ASEAN governments, only 4 and only 5 have ratified the Convention 87 and 98, respectively. And the ratification rate of these two important conventions in the Asia and the Pacific region as a whole is much lower than those of Latin America and also in Africa. So I had a chance, to speak in the OECD ASEAN Forum last year in Tokyo. I'm one of the 14 of 16 panelists. The other came from the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Trade, from the ASEAN government. The theme of that forum is exclusiveness. How to achieve the exclusive ASEAN through participation. But as a panelist, never spoke. I never had any single word like decent work or jobs, workers, trade union, social dialogue, from the other participants. So in concluding, now it's the time for us to enhance, to strengthen our teamwork among the human resources or labor or manpower ministers and ministries and employers and the trade unions to make the voices of workers in this region or ASEAN community heard by leaders and the finance minister and trade minister. Otherwise, we never can create a bright future of work we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yoshida. So if anyone else in the room can talk about how we can strengthen this teamwork, please stand up. How can we ensure that there's greater commitment to tripartism? Mr. Yoshida sort of talked about the difficulties across the rest of the ASEAN countries. So, okay, over to you, please. Yeah. Hang on for the mic, it's coming to you. Others, please get ready to share your points of view.
Hi, good morning, ministers and distinguished panelists. My name is Ho Xiong Yi, Assistant General Secretary of United Workers of Petroleum Industry. Having been a unionist for so many years, and I'm very pro-union. And for the successful tripartism, I think we need to also mention bipartism. Because, and more importantly as well, I think, because today we have a lot of young leaders as well, and I think that we need to nurture that kind of relationship. For bipartism to work, we need to continue nurturing the relationship. And as a unionist for so long, I've seen so many young human resource management coming on board. A lot of them have neglected these fundamental elements, because with a good relationship between the management and the union, that is the reason why we can support the policies, with that strong tripartism, and how are we going to translate it down and escalate that kind of information to our workers? And that is very important as well. Actually, that's just my comments and my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ho. Okay, very good. Anyone else, please? Next. Yeah, don't be shy. We don't have a lot of time. It's an important conversation. Okay, a gentleman over there. Yes, and who else? All right, a lady there. Okay, so the gentleman there first, please. Hands up again so that the runner can pass you the mic. Thank you. Okay, please introduce yourself.
Hi, hello. Thank you for the panelists for your, I think, very robust sharing this morning. My name is Tong Tek from the Singapore Ministry of Manpower. I think we recognize that the need to both ensure decent and adequate protections for workers, as well as to maintain an environment that businesses can be viable. Right? I think the ultimate objective here is to improve the lives of our people, and we think that it can be done through different ways. So I think it would be useful to hear from the panelists how have the different countries done this, and as well as to the ILO, what you expect from your member states.
The lady in front, please put your hand up so that the runner can pass you the mic. Yes.
Yes, good morning. I'm Sulistri from KSBSI Trade Union in Indonesia. So to strengthening the rule of tripartism, I think this is not only the obligation of the ILO, but we need to promoting the tripartism structure in other UN bodies. As we know that now UN has the SDGs, 17 goals, and one of the goal 8 is related for the decent work. The other thing is also UN has another instrument like UNGP, United Guiding Principle from the Business and Human Right. So this is really that tripartism is not only the ILO business, but also the other UN body business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think okay, one more comment, then I'll throw it back to the panel.
I'm Wahab from Employees Federation Malaysia. When we talk about tripartism, indeed, it is a very challenging thing. It is not an easy thing to do. Because to get the consensus of the three divergent views is going to be quite a challenge. But very important is for each party to understand the way forward. So once we understand the way forward, then it is easier to convince each party to go through that. For example, in the case of future of work, one of the key features that every one of us will experience will be the changing in the landscape of employment. When there is a change in the landscape of employment, a lot of things needs to be done. For example, the legislation needs to be more contemporary and relevant. So back to the dynamic of tripartism, and I would like to pick up one of the suggestions with regard to bipartism. It is very important, of course. The understanding of each parties is the key to the whole thing. You can never have the compromise. Compromise may not move you forward. Sometimes you have got to look at if the government of the country feels that this is the way for us to be competitive, they have got to convince the other two parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wahab. So back to you, panel. Just feel free to take on any points that were raised. Mr. Chongtek was hoping to hear a little more detail about how in your countries you balance the protection of labor with keeping businesses sustainable. Then we had a comment from Ms. Ho, maybe Ms. Goh, you want to address it, that one thing that undergirds tripartism is bipartism. So, you know, does management actually need to build up that limb of the relationship much stronger, make it much stronger, especially with the younger cohorts and generations of HR practitioners? Are they aware of the need for that? And then, you know, Mr. Wahab said that in a way, there must be joint efforts to make sure that each party knows what is coming up ahead in the future, so that everybody is on the same page. I don't know if Minister, you want to take that. And then finally, Sudhasree said that really, why do we not insert the mechanisms of tripartism more broadly into the UN? I think the hardest question is the first one that was posed by Mr. Yoshida. What will it take for more of our ASEAN friends to get on board with tripartism? Okay, so rich menu of issues. Who wants to go first? Mr. Tan put his hand up.
Just very briefly. Tripartism does not exclude bipartism. In other words, on company level, it's bipartism, collective bargaining between workers and management. But when it comes to policy, well, you may have to go through a tripartite machinery. It is going to be in the form of government issuances. And finally, I think the point of the lady about the tripartism in the UN is a very interesting proposition. At least if you don't have tripartite mechanism there, that the UN should respect tripartism. I mention that because there was a very important issue in the governing body when there was a General Assembly resolution to have a uniform salary system, and it ended in a reduction of the wages of the ILO staff. They did not, the UN did not respect the tripartite decision-making process in the ILO. So it has to be accepted by the ILO.
Okay, then now let me ask you, Mr. Tan, since you put your hands up first, what do you do in the Employers Confederation to ensure that the younger generations of HR professionals, or better still, the younger generations of business leaders renew or have that commitment to bipartism and tripartism? What are you doing?
We have training for younger people. And secondly, we who are already senior citizens should leave the organization and leave it to the younger generation. According to one Australian manager, he said, the problem of employers' organization is the problem of incumbency. People do not want to leave their places.
And what about the younger entrepreneurs in your city? Do they have a sense of this teamwork that has to continue? The younger younger business leaders.
Yes, I think we are seeing young people being energized into working for employers' organizations and the chambers of commerce.
Okay, over to Ms. Goh. Oh, sorry. I think Mr. Wallstaff, you go first then.
Thank you. There was a lot on the floor there. I'll make a couple of comments. I think the notion of tripartism, bipartism, actually, I think is the root of that is actually learning how to engage in a collaborative and partnership way, and not on a zero-sum way. That is trying to create an outcome that everyone can support. I thought the the speech this morning from the Minister of Manpower, talking about sharing a future vision, owning a common future, sharing a future vision, values and all that. Very often we find in negotiations and engagement, we don't get to share the beginning, we get told what the answer is and do you like it or not. That's not tripartism, that's not bipartism. But I think part of the answer to that is, as a whole, us learning, quality dialogue where we're actually starting on the same foot, and we're sharing where we're trying to get to, and we're using really good methods of how to work through logically how to achieve those things. And what I find is that disagreement certainly can be found, but it's a lot harder to find it when you start off with the same idea of where you're trying to get to, which is typically unions find themselves brought in after the big decisions have been made to really talk about the how do you get there. I just want to make one other quick comment on a slightly different issue, but one of the issues for New Zealand is that we've been had a very flexible labour market, which tends to rehire instead of retrain. And on top of that, we have a very high labour churn. We have turnover amongst the highest in the OECD, with the lowest social protection, one of the lowest of similar states. So we do have relatively low unemployment, but I think what we really need to see, and that challenge before, how do we encourage people to these ways of working, is that idea of we're in this together, and we need to reorient ourselves to how do we move organically to this future rather than be flexed to it, where workers end up being losers in that process.
Yeah, so I will make 2 points. One is just this one around tripartism and bipartism, and what I want to say is, sometimes when you look at the objectives, so the objectives of corporations, for instance, so corporations understand that in order to attract the best talent, it must create a competitive salary structure, it must have good benefits, it must also offer an environment where individuals are trained and developed and can continue to get that opportunity to grow. And this is exactly what unions at an individual level want as well. So, it then begs the question, why are there so much tension? And you really need to just peel the onion, right? And there are two, I think we need to avoid getting stuck in the micro discussion where we're discussing the benefits and the rights on an individual basis, but take the discussion at a macro level where we looked at individual corporations, how do we work together in order for us to prosper and in order for us to succeed in the conditions and the environment that we're in. Then the second thing I want to say is, and this is me making a plug for IHRP, the Institute of HR Professional. A few years ago, there was a survey, and an outcome of that survey was in order for us to develop and continue to develop a strong, diverse, competitive human capital here in Singapore, HR professionals needs to play a role. And therefore, in 2016, the Institute of HR Professionals was established, and this is to set a national framework by which we say we define the measure of success and the benchmark of what strong HR professionals look like. And the goal isn't with strong HR professional, but the goal is how do we achieve a progressive workforce? How do we achieve a competitive workplace? And how do we get into that desired outcome where the Singapore workforce is well respected and competitive globally?
Sure. Ms. Goh, you addressed talent, but we're also addressing the broad base of workers, rank and file. And so when you talk about the mission of your institute, are you teaching those who come through your institute, HR professionals, how to be in that conversation on the bipartisan angle, as well as to see the relevance of tripartism, therefore actually at the micro level, be prepared to interact with union leaders as well? Are they ready to do the things that Mr. Wallstaff referred to just now?
I think just from setting the benchmark for what great HR professional look like, it's a whole suite of skill sets, right? When we talk HR, it isn't just one angle, but it's a whole suite. And the ability to create win-win situations, to dialogue, to engage, to negotiate, from our HR professional, that's a skill set we want to develop.
Fantastic. All the best with that. Now, Minister, you've been very patient. Please go ahead and share with us your responses to the different comments you've heard.
I'm interested in starting off by saying these bipartisan and tripartism. I think both of them are not exclusive. They're inclusive. They're together. They have to be tied up together. I'm very concerned about bipartisan in the sense at the very regional level, where employers and employees must collaborate with each other. I think that is lack of it, and I agree with the Miss earlier. I think more young people should be given that opportunity to get involved in a lot of activities, which is, I think, is sadly not so. And some of them are overstaying their pleasure of the office. So we also have to get that moving. Dialogue is one thing. I'm one person who's very convinced that the more union members you have, the more unions you have, a strong culture of strength is built in them, and therefore they can work better. And it is shown statistically around the world that countries which have a lot of union members, the countries do well. Contrary to the belief by many employees with respect, who think that the more unions you have, the more terrorists you have, which is not the case. I think we should work towards achieving that. So in that respect, I am now pushing through a fierce amount of legislative changes in my country to bring about. One of the first thing that I have advised my ministry officials is to have, they go to the institutions or factories or areas to discuss on the role of membership and that kind of. We must be open. I think there's no harm to educate ordinary workers why they should join unions or why they should not join. I think it is the duty of the government to do it. So I'm trying to push that thing, and I hope we can take that in a win-win position. Obviously, without a strong system of business people, we will not succeed. I mean, that is sine qua non. I mean, that is a basic thing, you know. And coming back to Encik Wahab, I think I got no hesitation that there must be full consultation, joint effort, and we must work towards it. But I like the way Ms. Go has said. And I think that's what I have been doing, but I didn't know that I'm doing that. The early warning, I think is very good. Because in the last consultations, a few consultations, that we have far more consultations than necessary. Just to tell you, in the last 5 years, in the previous minister, he had only 2 meetings, if I'm not mistaken. We have already had 6 meetings so far. And to be very frank, Doctor, many of them are tired of the meetings. So we have to give them some to say, look, you must come for the meeting. Earlier they were complaining there are not enough meetings. Now I say monthly meetings. Now they get tired. They say, look, I'm tied up with so many things. I say, if a minister and the government can come, you must come. So we hope that kind of tripartism can work. And I like the way the early warning, because I think is that maybe unknowingly we don't realize that they got a lot of apprehension, both sides, including the government's notion of how to safeguard and also to protect and also to enhance the business capabilities and business aspect. Because if you don't have good business environment, what are we talking about workers? I think that is the primary aspect of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Okay. Well, a number of observations. I think I would be delighted if one of the outcomes of this conference was to repeat the Minister of Malaysia's comment that all governments should encourage people to join a trade union, that the business community has nothing to fear, that the governments concerned have nothing to fear, and that this should become all part of that paradigm shift and as a fulfillment of this idea of ambitions beyond growth. So I think that was a very positive and welcome statement. And all I can say, frankly, it would be a marvelous centenary gift for the ILO if you could make a positive announcement on the occasion of the June ILC conference, and I wish you and all the social partners every success in the conversations that you're having. Can I also say that reference was made to human resources managers, and I think I'm on the board of the UN Global Compact, which is essentially a private sector initiative, which now has 10,000 companies signed up to it, companies that are meant to accept the 10 basic principles of labor, human rights, environmental rights. And within that project, there is a link to the academic world. And I think it would be important if in the training and in the academic world that there would be more reference to the business responsibilities and human rights. And I think this is an issue which will grow in amplification as time goes forward and goes somewhat beyond corporate social responsibility. We have the UN guiding principles. More and more this is becoming a part of the kind of multilateral conversation about business respect for human rights, the sense of due diligence, that a business should be conducting due diligence into its operations to ensure that there's no adverse consequences on human rights, I think will add a brand new dimension to the life of human resources managers and may well encourage them to think about their role in a much more environmental and in terms of being part of that risk-averse analysis that companies have to conduct. I think partnership is important. I know I have my old colleagues here from UniAPRO. I see Prilal is here, and I see there's Raj. There's our UniAPRO friends. Part of our motto in the region has been to reach out to business. It started with global companies coming down to the region, and for those global companies to respect freedom of association at home. And now we will soon have 100 global framework agreements with companies. And that means dialogue at all levels to ensure that those basic human rights are respected, but also to deal with difficulties that we have and to deal with them in a pragmatic way. We can deal with them in a bipartisan way, that we're not dealing with these in the glare of publicity, but they are practical and they help understanding, because it's part of our work in the region to have that understanding of the unions, where they're coming from, and where the employers are falling down. And can I also say, because our sister spoke from Indonesia about tripartism in the UN. It would be very good for ASEAN to conduct a survey about the involvement of women in tripartite structures in the region. We have a problem of labour market participation. We have a problem of inequality of opportunity in terms of opportunity and in pay. And I think, therefore, another interesting conclusion would be the engagement of more women in social dialogue, in collective bargaining, and in the tripartite structures to ensure that we have a better quality of economic growth and more and fair and equitable employment opportunities for women in the region.
Okay, with that, let us take one more round of comments and questions before we wrap. We have about 8 minutes. I think I'll give you 6. And then I'll invite the panelists to give their closing comments. So it's back to you, please, everyone. Yes, gentleman there. Anyone else? Yes, PS, come. Anyone else? Yes, there. Okay, so please go ahead and tell us who you are. Everybody pay attention. Okay. No, it's on, don't worry. The guys at the booth are very good.
Okay. I'm Rajendra Acharya from Uni Global Union Asia Pacific region, Uni APRO. That's what Brother Jennings has referred recently. I don't want to drive reverse to those areas that has already been discussed, but in terms of bipartism or tripartism, whatever we have been saying, especially I just want to refer the question a sister has asked about young HR managers and all this. There is another fear, or sort of like uncomfort situation in terms of those dialogue events and dialogue meetings. Our global union have been a party and the partner of sectoral social dialogue in ILO level as well. What we have been seeing in the trend is the employers are now not nominating themselves in those meetings. Rather, they are nominating their legal advisors. We would like to see Brother Tan comes to the meeting. It would be much easier to discuss on the issues. But when you invite or nominate your legal advisor in that meeting, it will be much difficult for us to come to the conclusion.
Okay.
So this trend, I just want to highlight on this.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, let's bring the mic to the person over there first before we come back to the front. Hands up, please. Yes. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Ryan. I'm from the head of growth of YCH Group. We are third generation family business. Hey, Dad. Okay, so I'm a bit young, so forgive me for being precocious and idealistic. But personally, I find a lot of it boils down to will and over-reliance on monetary measures like levies or other forms of the monetary incentives or disincentives to look at employment in a fair and a cohesive manner. I mean, for example, if you boil down to it, perhaps someone who is in a union versus someone who is not. Most employers, all things being equal, would likely choose the fellow who is not in a union because the bargaining power is not so equal. Another thing is when you come down to it, when you boil down to the commercials, when you're bidding for business, manpower costs, one of the first things you scrutinize at manpower costs is not how fair it is or how productive your people are, it's how low it is. And that kind of effect trickles down, not just from the business, from the customer, all the way down to the supplier. And I think it's a squeezing game all the way down. So when you just look at money and how low it is, there's not a lot of room left to look at how fair you are, how productive your people are, how good are your employment practices, how many women are you employing when there's so little to go around.
Since you're young and not cynical, what would you like to see better in your country and the region? Please.
I personally would like some tougher, stronger frameworks apart from merely incentives, but actual, real disincentives to force companies to look at how fair are their suppliers' employment practices, their own employment practices, such that if, for example, you have someone undercutting the other, I would like it to be in their minds to have to scrutinize it. You can offer me this price, but why? Where are you getting these costs from? Are you squeezing your suppliers? Are you squeezing your own employees? Are you skimping out? Are you making them work extra shifts just to give me this business for me to give it to you. And if that is the case, I can't give it to you. I think that level of will is not there.
So is that enlightened self-interest of businesses? Or in Singapore, we say, for instance, a change agent has to be the public sector when it calls for contracts to lead the pack, or
I would,
legislation, or
I
what?
understand you completely. I would think a pure top-down approach doesn't work. I believe in the power of the tripartism. It has to be a collective effort of people checking each other to say, hey, you're not really pulling your weight.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Ryan, for the clarity of your vision. Over to PS Kam. Mike, please. It'll take a little while, sorry. We haven't figured out that technology to just teleport it there yet. Thank you so much. That's a very kind gentleman.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Obek Kam from the Singapore Ministry of Manpower. I was just going to say, in Singapore, we encourage workers to join the unions. We also encourage employers to join the Employers' Union, which is the National Employers' Federation. So we are all very even-handed. It makes for better negotiation. It makes for better consultations. I also wanted to take up a theme which I think has been talked about in terms of the Global Commission's recommendations, and that was in investing in people, particularly investing in skills and training. Minister, you also talked about skilling, reskilling and upskilling of workers. And I really believe that, for all our economies, the only way to get sustainable and inclusive growth is actually the kind of growth that is built on skills, the kind of growth that is built on productivity. That's the only way that it can be sustainable. No surprises for employers, no surprises for workers. So I wanted to sort of pose the question, for tripartism, we've been quite familiar with negotiating around wages, terms and conditions of employment. But I think very few countries have actually had serious tripartite negotiations around training, access to training, how that training ought to be relevant to businesses. I know of Denmark that has actually been quite a pioneer in this regard, but I think we'll welcome thoughts and views from the panel as to whether this might be a way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, PS Kam. Okay, think fast, talk fast. We have maybe 2 minutes to wrap. So feel free to respond to all the questions that have been raised. Businesses sending legal advisors rather than themselves, right? What else can be done in order to really reignite tripartism, especially when it comes to low-cost contracting and workers being chosen because they're cheaper, because they're not unionized, and then finally, okay, negotiating on skills and training, things like that. Okay, so ministers ready? Let's go.
Let me start off by saying on the lawyers going for these meetings, I think it's really awful. Why I say so, I was a practicing lawyer for 30 years. I know I argue more for my pocket than anything else. And I think it's a wrong manner to get things. I think the structure must change. We must get employers themselves to feel the real heartbeat. It must be the employers going there. It is not the lawyers. We're not. You see, at the bipartisan stage, at that level, we are talking engagement. We're talking discussion. And the last person who can do it right is the lawyers. I can tell you that. Because I think, we are talking about them arguing our case in court, whether rightly or wrongly for that kind of reasons. I agree with you. I think employers should do that. And in my country, the employers are actually having an academy to that sort, which I frequently try to attend, that their issues. And in fact, I've instructed my office to send representatives not only to the academy, but to all the universities in the country to enlighten them on the necessity on skilling, reskilling, and upskilling, because it's very important. But on this, I think the employers must take the upper hand. And we know what happens in Singapore. You got the credits for workers. And I think this is one of the suggestions that I'm going to take it back. I've read it up before, but somehow it has lapsed on and I think it's very important, a very good initiative to workers to take that opportunity, and I think they will do that. Okay? Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Who wants to go next? And please share with me your homework as well. Minister shared his homework. He's taking Skills Future back. Tell us what else you're going to do in response?
You've thrown me now. In 10 seconds or less, I absolutely agree. Training seems to be absolutely core to the challenge we face. And I think I haven't seen enough. I've seen Denmark, but I know there are some answers that we need to find there that is absolutely crucial. I just want to make a point that I think on a different level, I think the state, the public sector is a big employer, and in fact it has an opportunity to be a leader and an exemplar, not just in employment practice and the future of work, but also in relation to contractors. Because the state does a lot of contracting. Contractors are vulnerable, they need support, they need collective bargaining. We're beginning to do it actually in some industries in New Zealand, which is another whole seminar. But that's a vital bit. Homework is going to be obviously continuing this conversation in the tripartite forum in New Zealand on the future of work.
Yeah, I was having a conversation, this was a few years ago, with someone who is a very eminent business leader, and he was talking about countries that were quite resilient during the 2007-2008 economic crisis. And there is a pattern, and the pattern is these countries have very strong education system. And so education system and that transfers into training are absolutely critical for countries to remain resilient to whatever shocks that they may be. And that takes me to the point, and probably a homework for me as well, is this topic of sustainability. We talked about it interspersed throughout the conversation today. And in many discussions, if we meaning governments, unions, and corporations are willing to take a step back and say, when I make a decision, we do not sacrifice tomorrow for today, I think we would win. So my homework is, consistently in the boards I represent, the companies I represent, to focus on longevity and endurance as a core.
First of all, I would like to agree with the minister, because I'm also a lawyer by profession. But in my country, over the years, we have left
All these
collective bargaining
confessions coming out.
to the company managers already, the personnel managers. We have left the scene for many decades now. So collective bargaining is already at company level with the managers and the personnel managers. And finally, I just want to make a statement, just a little suggestion, perhaps, that you may have if we can have a small global commission with just one agenda to determine the steps that will make industries sustainable and productive. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, in the OECD employment report last week on the future of work, the OECD recommend that collective bargaining be extended to training, reskilling, and upskilling. And that's something that they haven't done before, but they recognize there's a great deal of mileage for this. And when we look at all these tables in the world of where the most competitive companies and companies are, they tend to be those countries where there's an investment in tripartism, where there's an investment in training and the reskilling of its workforce. That's one point I'd like to make. I think supply chain management is a big deal. The young man is correct. And this is where we had issues with Uberization. And that all of a sudden you develop an app, and then you develop a business plan around that app where you quite deliberately say that my business is going to succeed because I'm not going to pay social insurance, I'm not going to have employees, and I'm not going to be responsible to them for what happens in the workplace. It now looks at that wave of kind of enthusiasm for that Uber model is very much on the wane. But I think this idea of businesses with purpose, respecting their responsibilities, are real. Our experience of supply chains was Rana Plaza and the Bangladesh Accord, something that we were told was impossible. We made an agreement with 200 companies to put in place independent factory health and safety inspection, in the country, in Bangladesh. We've been at it now for 6 years. We've saved thousands of lives. We've trained 500,000 people. And if anything, we've made Bangladesh more competitive. The missing link is the fact that the wages of the people have not improved. But it's a way of raising levels of what we would consider fair competition.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. And unfortunately, it took a terrible disaster to get that progress. And what we want to avoid is that. So let me give you my key takeaways. First, the idea that tripartism is win-win-win. Why? Because it is an early warning system for every of the three partners as to what is coming up ahead. To Wahab's point of view, or what he shared just now, the more we know about the future together, the more we can adjust and do something about that together. And can't be, as Mr. Wallstaff said, that Labour is the final guy who gets to know what's happening, or where the decision has been made that they are the afterthought. So that's not the case, that's not what we're talking about. So first takeaway, tripartism's great early warning system for all the partners involved. Second, that if we want that to work, there has to be meaningful engagement. Can't just send the lawyers if you're the business leader. Even the minister agreed, and I think Ms. Tan also agreed. So really that the people who really matter have to be involved in that discussion. And also in that respect, the unionized countries do better in difficult times, but also are associated with countries where there's better growth. So get the unions moving and get better representation. It's good for all. And then third, that there is actually a skill set to ensuring that dialogue works. And I think Mr. Wallstaff made a very desperate appeal to recognizing that. And finally, because he's the only minister representative of a government here that's on the panel, I really like that he reinforced the idea that there has to be will, political will to do this. He mentioned how many meetings he's had this year with his council, wearing out his members. Okay, well done, Minister. And I think the appeal is to governments to redouble their efforts to believe in the value of tripartism. And to Mr. Yoshida's point of view just now, I think you need to institutionalize that in the countries, but also in the region. And I think that was the appeal, that there'll be traction not just in our countries, but together, because we're all here. I mean, kudos to the Singapore government for bringing us all here. Let's use this as an opportunity to redouble our commitment to tripartism that fosters social protection, a better deal for workers, which should serve businesses better. We all rely on one another for a more peaceful and prosperous world. With that, please join me in thanking my esteemed panelists for speaking today, sharing their points of view. And panelists, let's thank the participants for their great points of view and their appeals to us as well. Thank you very much, participants. Enjoy lunch in the afternoon. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Right now we're going out for lunch, but before we go out for lunch, may I invite those who are going for the lunch dialogue, right? A couple of you have signed up for the lunch dialogue, so maybe to proceed first to the lunch dialogue, you can follow my colleague over there with his hands raised. The lunch dialogue. Right, for those of you who are going for the other lunch, right? It's going to be held at the same location as where we had our tea and breakfast, right? So please be at the ballroom by 2:30, right? 2:30, so lunch, the same place as where you had your tea and breakfast. All right, thank you very much.